Welcome back to another episode of the Big Life Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Neal Oates Jr., and today's conversation is one that so many people feel but rarely name: the permission to outgrow your environment. Not the people themselves necessarily, but the container you've been living in, mentally, professionally, relationally, emotionally. When you start to rise, not every environment rises with you.
So true, Neil. And my name is Robin Lewis, and this episode is for anyone who is feeling a tug. A sense that where you are is too small for who you are becoming. Maybe you can't explain it. Maybe you feel guilty for wanting more. Maybe the people around you don't understand the new version of you that's emerging. And today we want to talk about what it means to honor that shift without a shame. And when we talk about environment, I wrote a couple down here. The environment could be where you work. It could be who you live with. It could be the city that you're in. And it might be those. But more often, your true environment could be like your mindset of I'm not ready or I've always been this way. This is just who I am. Maybe it's the environment of a habit that you have. Procrastination, people pleasing. I can say a thing or two about that. Or saying yes too often. Maybe it could be a routine, the way you start your day or how you use your time. Maybe it could be a circle of friends who drain you or minimize you or who misunderstand your growth. Or maybe it's a commitment that you made, something that made sense for a past version of you.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to think about here. And so what Neil and I, as we jump in here, want you to consider is what environment am I living in? Physically, mentally, relationally, or emotionally? And then have I outgrown this?
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined. They're built, brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Robin, thank you for jumping in there. And ladies and gentlemen, allow me to apologize to not addressing my friend the right way. Robin, how are you doing today?
Oh man, I'm doing great, brother. So good to be here with you and our listeners today, Neil. I'm excited to be here, adding value to others.
And part of that is the reason why we get straight into it, because we're so excited about the topics we're going to talk about that oftentimes we forget that we are in this thing together, that we're always here trying to add value to others. But I want to tell you, I'm excited to have this conversation. And we're going to start in the necessary, scary place. And that's identifying why we outgrow our environment, because there's going to be a pill for us to swallow so that we can get to the other side of being healthy and being in healthy environments. But here's the truth, Robin and friends: growth creates tension, right? And one of the earliest tensions you feel is between who you were in your old environment and who you're becoming now. And that's what Robin was talking about. Environments that once felt comfortable start feeling constricted. Conversations that used to energize you, now they drain you. Opportunities that once excited you feel too small. Like, I don't want that anymore. That's how you know you're expanding. You're not breaking loyalty. You're breaking limits. And that's going to require this permission that we're going to talk about today, Rob.
Hey, I love that. Breaking limits. Growth is not a betrayal. And for a lot of people listening, the guilt that they feel doesn't come from growth. It comes from the fear of leaving people or expectations behind us. But at some point, a leader has to make peace with this, because you can't shrink to stay accessible to people who refuse to.
Robin, here we go. I see you're hitting us with this heavy stuff early.
So true.
And I think about that, because you talk about the guilt, it's not from growth. It's that fear of leaving those. Many times you didn't say this word, but I know that word is in there. Many times we have that fear of leaving those people that we love and that love us. And I know love is patient, love is kind. So we're like, well, am I being mean? Am I being unloving if I have to leave them? But many times the heights that we're trying to ascend is going to require us to leave some of those behind. And so, Robin, sometimes the environment is not a place or a person. You mentioned this in your opening dialogue, is that sometimes it's a mindset, right? You've outgrown that belief system that kept you safe. Human beings, even Robin and Neal, we love the idea of safety. We might have a different idea or version of safety, but we love it. Sometimes that mindset might be the habits that kept you stable and the routines that kept you sane. And I know that's part of my mentality, Robin, is that I'm a routine guy. I wake up, do the same thing so that I can keep my sanity. But here's what we know, is that your environment evolves from the internal to the external. And that's why doing that internal work is necessary. But oftentimes for many of us, Robin, it can be scary.
Yeah, man, it's so true. And so, Neal, let's speak directly to our listeners for a moment. If you're trying to figure out whether you have outgrown an environment, I want to give you a few signs that you could consider to answer this question. So the first one is that you feel mentally cramped. Your ideas no longer fit inside the conversations that you're having.
Hold on right there, Robin. So many times when that happens, we start thinking we're crazy, right?
Yeah. And there are times where we acknowledge it too. Like one of the things that I'm in environments sometimes where people are always talking about the past. Yeah. And, so what I am talking about is it doesn't fit inside that circle anymore. Or maybe people are always, you ever had a group of people that they're just always talking about politics? That's every time they get together, that's what they're talking about. And, I feel mentally cramped there because I don't want to just talk about those things. Make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And so here's why I'm comfortable saying it makes perfect sense, because those people who were in my life that were having those conversations with me, they're not the caliber of people that would be listening to the Big Life podcast. So I could even say their names and they would never know. But absolutely, Robin, I've felt that way before.
And I don't mean to offend any of our listeners. You might be a politician listening to this. That might be your burning passion and desire. I don't want to knock you for that. So please don't misunderstand what I just said. But that's for Robin personally. And so just consider that there might be ideas that you have that no longer fit into the conversations that you're actually having. The second one is your ambition feels misunderstood. People think you're doing too much when you sense that you're only getting started. Right? So your ambition feels misunderstood is the second one.
Robin, on that one, there's a saying where I have some acquaintances, and you and I, we always talk about how much we're doing. Are we doing too much not from an ambition point, but is our focus spread too thin? But I have some people in my life, they say, Neal, how does it feel to have already won? Neal, you've made it. You and Robin have the Big Life podcast, right? You've made it. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, you think I've won, and I feel like I haven't even gotten in the game. And so therefore, when we have conversation, I think it is important for us to be aware of this in our environments. Sometimes we just have to keep our mouths shut, because oftentimes our ambition can be misunderstood. And then that little nagging internal voice starts telling us you are doing too much. And then that can stifle any momentum or ambition that we have.
So we're talking about signs that you've outgrown your environment, and that's one of them. And the third one is that your peace shifts. What used to comfort you now frustrates you, right? And so your peace shift. Number 4 is your future feels closer than your past. You think more about what you can become than what you've been, right? Signs that you've outgrown your environment. And the 5th one is your spirit feels restless. You're not burned out. You're understimulated. And so those are signs that you've outgrown your environment.
And Robin, I'm going to add one more with your permission.
Yes, sir.
And that is that oftentimes you're defending your growth more than you're pursuing it. So here's what I mean by that. If you're spending more time explaining yourself to people instead of expanding yourself as a person, that's a sign that you might be in the wrong environment, having
That's
to
a good one.
justify.
That's a good one.
So, Robin, on there, I'm already excited because we've looked at why we outgrow and then some signs. So now we're going to get to that dirty word called emotions. So we're going to look at and have some quick convo about the emotional cost of holding on too long. Right. So we might think of this as getting calluses on our hands if we hold on to something too long, too tight. And so let's talk about the cost of ignoring the shift, because we've mentioned that there are going to be times when the shift is necessary. But what happens if we ignore it? If we stay in an environment that we've outgrown, we start negotiating with our potential. We start saying, maybe, and this is a big one. We start making excuses. We downplay those gifts, talents, and skills that God has given us. And then we even start resenting the things that we once prayed for because they no longer satisfy us. And I believe that resentment is that dangerous door that once we open it, all types of stuff starts to come in.
It's so true. And I think resentment is often a sign of stagnation, not selfishness, right? Some listeners are tired, not because they're doing too much, but because they're living a life too small, stagnated, right? Outgrowing an environment doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest, right, Neal?
That's hard for some of us to hear, Robin.
Exactly. And so that's why we're doing this podcast today, folks. So lean in on this one now. We're going to share some practical stuff with you right now. Growth doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to end in a breakup, a resignation storm, or a fallout. And so there are ways that you can transition with wisdom and with honor. So how do you find yourself?
Robert, but before you go there, I'm glad, and I apologize for interrupting, but I'm glad you said that, because we were talking about outgrowing environments, and then we said it's not always a physical place or even people, but some people are going to hear Robin and Neal told me that I need to leave this person, leave this place. And so this is where you're telling us there is a wise way to grow. That does not mean we have to totally sever, right? And so I think that's where we're going into. And so I just wanted to make sure that the audience lock in and listen to what Robin is going to share with us now, because he mentioned this doesn't have to be war. It doesn't have to be a battle. It can be a transformation. It can be a refiguration, not an end to a thing.
Exactly. And so we are talking about transitioning, though, right? If you have outgrown the environment, then there is a shift that needs to take place. And so how you go about it is what we're going to be talking about now. For the first one is to name the shift, because you cannot manage what you won't admit. And so say out loud, I am changing. Whatever that means for you, I am changing, right? So name the shift that you need to make. The second one is to communicate with clarity. Not everyone needs an explanation, first of all, but the relationship worth keeping does deserve clarity, right? So not everybody needs an explanation, but there are those relationships that are important to you that they deserve some sort of clarity. So communicate with clarity. Number 3 is to honor what the old environment gave you. We just celebrated Thanksgiving recently, and gratitude is what we're talking about here. Be grateful for how that environment served you, because that environment did serve you at one point, right? And so gratitude keeps you grounded, and bitterness, on the other hand, keeps you stuck. So keep that attitude of gratitude for the old environment. The fourth one is to set new boundaries. Your new season requires new agreements. And so set new boundaries for the new environment, or as you leave the old one. And then number 5 is move before doubt talks you out of it. A delayed transitions often turn into internal conflict, where you start battling with yourself. "Oh, there we go again. My goodness." Or I love these people, but I'm not, and so if you don't move soon enough, then that can lead to you having this internal conflict with yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you're watching this podcast episode or listening to this podcast, but I get the the joy of seeing my friend, Mr. Robin Lewis, on camera. And as he read that last one, move before doubt talks you out of it, he had a smile and a smirk on his face. And then he talked about those delayed transitions. Why that response as you were reading that one, Robin, about move before doubt? Because look, I'm going to dive in because some of our people, they're like, hold on, I might need to watch this somewhere. Why that physical response from you? Is this a peek into Robin Lewis's life?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, we don't have to stand here too long, but there might be somebody that relates. And so what that does is it plays on your insecurity. It causes you to be second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
And then what ends up happening oftentimes is that you don't take the steps that you need to take. So yeah, definitely, sir.
And I'm, as we always say, I'm right there with you. That's why I recognize it in my brother here on the podcast. And so what I want to remind us, or maybe introduce this idea of us, just after Robin shared those 5 things, one of the most powerful transitions is silent, right? You don't owe everyone a speech. You just owe your future self a chance. So we don't need a guarantee. We don't need a speech. We just need an opportunity. And sometimes the environment you need is born the moment you leave the one that no longer fits. And that means that we might not have even seen the new environment until we verbalize, communicate, hey, I'm changing the environment. I'm changing myself. And I'm moving forward.
Yes, and that one is worthy of saying again, man. But the point you are making is once you take that action, then the future will fall into place. You don't have to have all the answers, but it's about taking the action that you know you need to take. Neal, I want to ask you directly. I think this is good to just pause maybe for some personal reflection for our listeners. Was there a season where you knew that you had outgrown your environment, whether that be eternally or externally, but you had to work through the fear of stepping out?
So absolutely. So I'm going to share one with you that some people know, not many people do, but I had grown in my real estate business. I was underneath my mentor, my leader, and we're still great friends to this day. But I had outgrown that space. And so I went to him and I said, hey, I think it's time for me to go. We had been together for 8.5 years, Robin. And so 8.5 years under his tutelage. And then he says, I was expecting this conversation 2 years ago. He says, I wish you all the best. But I also had to accept that some people would never celebrate the new vision that I had because it required more of me and less of them. All right. So once I stepped out and left his team, then there were some people who were like, Roman was my leader's name. They were like, Roman, you're going to support Neal in this. And they weren't upset that Roman supported me. They were upset that now they would have to do more. And so for a moment, growth was lonely, right? I'm over here trying to do my thing while he was my coach and my mentor, my leader. He still had to run his business. And so for a moment, I felt like I was out there all by myself, Robin. But eventually, it attracted the people and the environments that were aligned with who I was becoming. And I found myself in a space, not with team leaders or good agents. I found myself with elite brokers. And then all of a sudden I looked left and right and I said, hey, this is a good place to be. But it was scary for a moment there. Yeah.
That is so good. I'm so glad we asked you that question because it's good. I think our listeners need to hear stuff like that, man. So when you step out, there it was lonely, but the loneliness was temporary.
Yes.
Right? That's what I heard you saying.
That's what you heard me say.
Yeah. And now you're aligned. The alignment is permanent. You're in a place now where you are aligned with where you were growing to.
But Robin, here's what I've learned, and here's where we're going to go next as we continue our conversation. And that when I took that step, I realized that my new environment out here, being a broker, being a business owner, being the voice and the decision maker, it's a new standard, right? So my new environment is a new standard. And so here's what I want to communicate to those of you who are listening or watching is that when you give yourself permission to outgrow your environment, you are not abandoning your life. Let's be very clear. You are not taking everything, throwing it into the wastebasket. You are optimizing it. You are choosing alignment over acceptance. And that's going to be a hard thing for many of us to accept. So we want to choose alignment over acceptance. We're choosing expansion over comfort, and we're choosing evolution over that dirty word that Robin mentioned, stagnation. And all of those choices are beneficial, but they might be scary initially.
That's good. And your future will always require more space than your past. And so we have to make room for the bigger versions of ourselves. That's the point. I think the underlying of all of this is that we can't, you've heard the saying, you can't go to second. Well, you can't go to third base with your foot still on second, right?
Right.
Something like that. It might not be second and
That's
third
right.
that they
Come on.
use, but that's the point, is that we have to make room for the bigger version of ourselves. And we have to make room for the people who can hold that version, make room for the opportunities that match your capacity, not your comfort zone. I think that's a main point, takeaway that we want our listeners to get today.
So, Robin, as we're sharing this, and we're about to close, ladies and gentlemen, we're saying these words articulately. We're saying them with eloquence. We're saying them with confidence. But it does not mean that this journey of outgrowing, or the permission that you need to give yourself to outgrow your environment, is an easy thing to do. So we've packaged really 2 lifetimes of experience into under 30 minutes. And so we want to make sure that you know that this is not an easy thing to do, but it is necessary. And the reason I wanted to pause here is because if you are a listener of the Big Life podcast, whether you've heard every episode of you, or if you've stumbled onto this episode here, you are the person that is going to outgrow environments. Robin has done it. I've done it. Hopefully, we continue to grow, right, and have to do this necessary work. So we're just going to ask that if this episode spoke to you, take a moment this week to ask yourself one simple question. What environment is no longer serving who I am becoming? And here's my ask of you. Don't rush the answer. We're going to do as my friend and brother always says. We're going to sit with it. We're going to slow down. We're going to reflect. We're going to listen to it. We're going to honor both the question and the answer. And then it's Robin and I's belief that God will show you what to do next.
Yeah, that's so good. Especially, we mentioned what some of those environments might be. Some of those environments are internal, not just external. So that's the other reason that we need to sit with it also. It might be habits that we have. It might be even a digital environment. Who are we connected to? Where are we spending our time online? And so on. There can be, when we talk about environment, there might be things that we're not even thinking of. And that's a good reason to actually sit with it as well. And remember, you don't need permission to move on. You don't need permission from your circle. You don't need permission from your past. Sometimes it's our past, by the way. I don't know if we mention that one too often, but that's something I was just sharing with Neal not too long ago, that there are things that I've done in my past that still are in the back of my mind, like I haven't really I haven't left that environment. So your past can be one of those too. And we don't need permission from it. We don't need permission. You don't need permission from your comfort zone. You only need permission from yourself. Hear us today. You only need permission from yourself. When you grow, your environment must grow with you, or you must grow beyond it.
Robin, you gave us choices, but I don't know that I like the choices, right? So as a small person, and I'm not talking about anyone specific, but Neal, I'm like, I don't like the choices either. My environment must grow with me, or I must grow beyond it. Like both of those are ouch and ouch, right? So Robin, first, before I go any further, thank you for this conversation. These are the types of conversation. These are the types of environments that grow with me so that I don't have to grow beyond it. And in fact, this is an environment where I have to grow to keep up with the environment. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to us, I want to thank you not only for joining us for another episode of The Big Life, but I want to thank you for being our environment that forces us to grow, right? So you all are not only growing with us, we're growing with you because we have to be bigger so that we can live the big life. And if this episode added value to your journey, share it with someone you know that is on the edge of a new season, because we know that great things are going to happen. So I just want to encourage you to keep growing, keep stretching, and keep living the big life. Robin, do you have anything in closing for the audience before we kick them out of here today, sir?
I just want to say I'm grateful to you, sir. I know I said it in one of our recent episodes, but one of the things that attracted you and I is that we're both growth minded. And that's an example of an environment that, as I was stepping out there in my growth, when we connected, we decided that we were going to meet on a regular basis just to kind of encourage and challenge and just be around another person who is on this journey of growth, on this journey of trying to reach their full potential. And it's an example that you and I did intentionally, that as we took that step, who knew where that was actually going to go, right? It ended up in a podcast and so many other things that we are doing. And it's just a great example. And I appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much.
And you are appreciated. I'm smiling and laughing because I sit here and I've known people longer who have not had the impact on my life that you have. And so I sit here and I think, and this is almost a daily occurrence. I'm like, man, one, of course, I got to tell my wife, but then my thought is, I've got to tell Robin, or man, I don't want to tell Robin. Right. So if it's a positive, I'm like, yeah, I got to tell Robin. Or the other side is, I'm like, man, I've got to tell Robin. And so even before we started recording this episode, I had some good things happen. I'm like, hey, Rob, let me tell you this and this and this and this. And then on the other side, you're like, and this and this and this. And so, ladies and gentlemen, put yourself in environments that are going to make you better. The environment will improve. You will improve. Those who are looking at you, those that are surrounded by you will improve. And then ultimately, you will find that you are experiencing the big life. And that's why we are here. And so once again, Rob, thank you. Love you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, before Robin and I just continue to have a brotherly love fest, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what you need to know. And that is that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.